The blood on the mahogany door wasn't hers. My loves, I have opened a lot of wrong doors in my life. None of them held a man like this one. 2:47 in the morning. Dr. Jasmine Brooks, 29 years old, a black nurse finishing a double shift on the VIP floor. Deep teal scrubs, a white coat with her name stitched in gold, and a third floor marked under renovation that never once saw a hammer. She goes down for morphine that isn't there. Her badge blinks green on a door it should never open. Inside, a man is bleeding out on the marble. Kang Min Jae. They call him the Koi. A black carp inked down the left side of his neck, sliding under his collar. 6'4". A platinum watch. A shirt soaked dark at the flank. He presses her against the door. A pistol at her ribs. You saw nothing, he whispers. Aigu. She takes the barrel in her hand and tells him to sit down. He locks the suite from the inside. All night, the two of them, sealed in steel. She stitches in silence. He watches the one person alive who does not fear him. But what happened when the sun came up? What he demanded of her then? That is where this story truly turns. Stay with me. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and click join to become a member and help our channel. Jasmine Brooks capped the last IV line at 2:47 in the morning, and her hands were steady even though nothing else in her was. 16 hours. The VIP wing had swallowed her whole shift and then reached for a second one, and she had let it, because the alternative was going home to a phone that only rang with bad news. She pressed the tape flat against the patient's forearm. Deep teal scrubs, white coat with her name stitched in gold thread, the badge clipped at her chest. She looked like someone who had it together. That was the uniform's job. The old man in suite 1102 slept through her whole visit. Private insurance. A view of the river. 2 nurses assigned to a floor that held 8 people, while 3 floors below, the general ward stacked patients 2 to a bay. Her phone buzzed against her hip. She stepped into the corridor before she read it. Dialysis center. A delayed appointment notice. Her grandmother's Thursday slot had been pushed to Saturday. 3rd time this month. Insurance authorization pending. Pending. The word did a lot of damage for 6 letters. Jasmine read it twice. Then she put the phone away, in the coat pocket, the deep one, and she kept walking toward the med station like the message hadn't landed. Her grandmother had raised her, had worked 2 jobs so Jasmine could sit still long enough to become the first Dr. Brooks anybody in the family had ever met. Now the woman's kidneys were failing on a schedule the insurance company kept editing, and Jasmine's salary went where salaries go. She did the math without meaning to. Saturday instead of Thursday meant 2 more days of a body holding on to what a body was built to release. It meant her grandmother would call Friday and pretend the swelling in her ankles was nothing, because the woman had never in her life admitted to needing a thing she couldn't pay for. Jasmine knew that voice. She had inherited that voice. She used it now, on herself, telling herself the shift was almost over, when the shift was not almost over at all. She logged into the medication cabinet. Her fingers found the keys by memory. You're still here. Loretta Vance came around the corner, with a chart tucked under one arm, reading glasses swinging on their chain, navy scrubs and that beige cardigan she wore against the hospital's aggressive air conditioning. 52 years of this building lived in the way she walked, unhurried, like the floor belonged to her more than to any director who signed her checks. I picked up Raina's half, Jasmine said. Her kid's sick. And who picks up yours, baby? Jasmine didn't answer that. She pulled the morphine log toward her and started counting ampules, because a controlled substance count was a thing you could finish, unlike most things. Loretta watched her for a moment. You look like something the river spit back. I feel worse. Then you'll love this. Loretta lowered her voice, though the corridor was empty. Prescott's doing rounds. At 3 in the morning, in a suit. Jasmine's hands stilled on the ampules. Dr. Walter Prescott did not do rounds. Prescott was a director, a man who appeared at galas and board photos, and never once inside a room where someone was actively dying. If he was walking the VIP wing before dawn in a pressed suit, it was because someone up there had reason to be watched. "Why?" Jasmine said. "Didn't ask. Man doesn't answer supervisors." Loretta set her glasses on her nose and looked at the count sheet over Jasmine's shoulder. "You're short." "I know I'm short." "How short?" "2 vials. Pharmacy didn't restock the VIP cabinet." Jasmine flipped the log closed. "Room 118 is going to need something for pain before 6. His chart says he wakes screaming." Loretta made a sound in her throat. She reached over and tapped the corner of the count sheet, twice, the way she did when she was about to say a thing she'd said before. "There's a supply cabinet on 3, she said. "Full narcotic stock. Nobody signs it out because nobody's supposed to be down there." She paused. "The floor's been under renovation 11 months. So I've worked here since before you could read a monitor, and I've never once seen a contractor carry a single board onto that floor. No dust, no permits on the door, no noise." She let that sit. 11 months of renovation and not one nail. "You tell me what gets renovated that quiet." Jasmine looked at her. "I'm not telling you to go," Loretta said. "I'm telling you what I know. There's a difference, and at my age I've learned to keep them separate." She squeezed Jasmine's shoulder once, warm and heavy, and moved off down the corridor toward the elevators, her sneakers whispering against the polished floor. Jasmine turned back to the cabinet and tried to make 2 vials appear out of nothing. They did not. She thought about the 3rd floor while she reconciled the log. 11 months. She had walked past the elevator button for that floor 1,000 times and never once seen it light. A hospital did not seal a whole level for the better part of a year over drywall. A hospital that sealed a level that long was hiding something the state was not supposed to find, and hospitals only hid things that made money quietly. She had learned that much in 3 years of watching who got a private room and who got a hallway gurney. None of that was her business. Room 1108 was her business. She wrote the number on the back of her hand with a pen that was going dry. He arrived the way weather arrives. Dr. Walter Prescott stepped off the elevator with 2 residents trailing him, both of them young, both of them holding tablets they clearly did not need. His charcoal suit sat perfect under a white coat so starched it could have stood on its own. Gold-rimmed glasses, a fountain pen in the breast pocket, gold, positioned like a medal. He walked the corridor as though inspecting it for a purchase. Jasmine stood when he neared the station. You stood for Prescott. Everyone did. Dr. Brooks. He read her name off her coat rather than off memory. You're on the narcotics count. Yes, sir. We came up 2 vials short on the VIP restock. I've logged the discrepancy and flagged pharmacy. He extended one hand without looking at her, and one of the residents placed the count sheet in it. Prescott read it slowly. The corridor waited. You logged a discrepancy, he said, on a controlled substance count, on my wing, at 3 in the morning, and your solution was a note. Pharmacy doesn't restock until 6, sir. There was no one to. There was you. He set the sheet down on the counter, aligned its edge to the counter's edge with one finger. Do you know what a missing narcotic looks like on a state audit, doctor? It looks like a nurse. It always looks like a nurse. Never the pharmacy, never the director, the person whose name is on the count. The 2 residents kept their eyes on their tablets. One of them, a girl who couldn't have been long out of school, had gone pink at the throat. I counted it correctly, Jasmine said. Level. The vials were never delivered. The camera on the pharmacy cart will show that. Will it? He looked at her then, fully, the gray-blue eyes doing something cold and unbothered behind the gold rims. You've been here, What? 3 years? You work doubles. I see your name on more shifts than anyone on this floor. He let the pen hover near his pocket. A woman who needs money that badly is a woman an auditor asks about first. It landed exactly where he aimed it. Not the accusation, the reason he assumed for it. A woman who needs money that badly. He'd built the whole sentence around the word woman and the word badly, and he'd said it in front of 2 people young enough to believe him, and he'd said it because he could, because the room was arranged so that his word weighed more than her count sheet, and they both knew the arrangement by heart. Jasmine kept her face still. She had been trained her whole life to keep her face still in rooms like this, in front of men like this, and the training held even when the rest of her went hot. Her grandmother's voice. You do not give them the reaction. The reaction is the only thing they came for. Don't hand it over. Room 1108 wakes in pain around 5, she said. I need morphine for him. That's the whole of my problem tonight, sir. Prescott straightened his cuff. Then solve it without embarrassing my wing again. He turned to the residents. This is the difference between medicine and management. Medicine forgets the paperwork. Management remembers who signed it. He walked on. The residents scurried. The pink-throated girl glanced back at Jasmine once, an apology she didn't have the rank to say out loud. The corridor emptied. The monitors beeped their small mechanical patients. Jasmine stood at the station with her hands flat on the counter and breathed until the heat drained out of her fingers. Then she picked up the count sheet, squared it, and set it down again, exactly where he'd left it. Room 1108 would wake at 5. That part was true no matter what Prescott thought of her. There was a man who would open his eyes into pain, and there was a cabinet on the 3rd floor that held what would stop it, and between those 2 facts was a floor that had been under renovation for 11 months without a single nail. She looked at the elevator a long time. If she went up to pharmacy and waited for 6, 1008 would wake at 5, and there would be an hour of a man screaming that she could have prevented, and Prescott would somehow find a way to put that on her count sheet too. If she paged a supervisor, the answer would be a form. Everything in this building was a form, and forms took longer than a man's pain. There's a supply cabinet on 3, full narcotic stock. Loretta had not told her to go. Loretta had told her what she knew and walked away, because Loretta was 52 and had learned to survive this place by keeping her name off the wrong sheets. Jasmine was 29 and had a grandmother whose appointment kept sliding, and a director who had already decided what kind of woman she was. She thought, if I'm going to be accused of it anyway, let it at least be for someone who needed it. Then she took the badge off her chest and closed her fist around it. The service stairwell smelled of concrete and cold. Jasmine went down 2 flights with her clinical sneakers making no sound, past the door marked 4, down to the door marked 3, where a laminated sign hung crooked on the handle, under renovation, no admittance. The lamination had yellowed. The tape at its corners had gone brittle and brown. She stood on the landing and listened. Nothing. No compressor hum. No plastic sheeting breathing against a vent. None of the small sounds a real construction site makes even when it sleeps. Just the building's deep mechanical exhale coming up through the floor. Loretta's voice in her head. There's a difference. Keep them separate. Jasmine pressed her badge to the reader beside the door. It should have flashed red. A renovation floor, an interdicted level, her low-clearance nurse's credential. It should have refused her. Instead, the light went green, and the magnetic lock released with a soft, expensive click, and the door swung inward into a corridor that no renovation had ever touched. Carpet, deep and clean, the kind that eats footsteps. Warm lighting behind frosted sconces. The walls were paneled, not painted, and the air carried something that had no business on a hospital floor, leather, and under it, faint, the copper smell she knew from 100 trauma bays. Blood. Jasmine stepped inside and the door sealed behind her with the same soft click. The sound of it closing was the sound of the last easy version of her life ending, though she had no way to hear that in it yet. It was just a good lock doing its job. The corridor ran straight to a set of double doors, and along it, spaced like the rooms of a hotel, stood single doors of dark wood. Not hospital doors, mahogany, heavy, with brushed handles, no room numbers, no charts in the wall slots, no slots. She was already wrong to be here. She knew that in her spine, but 1108 would wake at 5, and the supply cabinet Loretta meant had to be somewhere along this hall, and so she moved down it, reading the doors for anything marked, her badge still warm in her hand. There was a camera in the corner, where the corridor met the ceiling, its small red eye steady. She noted it and kept walking, because turning back now would look worse on a recording than going forward, and because the smell had begun to organize her, the way a code organizes a room, pushing the fear down under the task, giving her hands somewhere to go. Blood was a thing she knew what to do with. Blood on a hotel carpet on a floor that did not exist was a different thing, but her body could not tell the difference yet, and she let her body lead. The copper smell got stronger. She stopped at the third door because a thin line of light lay under it, and because that was where the smell lived. She pressed her badge to the reader beside it without deciding to. Green. The lock let go. Jasmine pushed the door open. The room was not a supply closet. It was a suite, a wide bed, a low couch, a desk with a lamp burning on it, and on the floor beside the bed, half propped against the frame, was a man leaving a great deal of himself on the carpet. He was enormous. That was the first thing, before the blood registered, before anything. The sheer size of him, shoulders that filled the space between bed and wall, a body built like something meant to break other things. Black shirt open at the collar, sleeves shoved up thick forearms. The left side of the shirt was soaked through and gone black-red, clinging to his ribs, and his hand pressed against it, and the blood came anyway, welling between fingers the size of tools. His head was down, black hair slicked back off his forehead, wet at the temples, and along the left side of his throat, running down into the collar, inked in old traditional black, a koi, a carp mid-swim, its tail vanishing under the fabric. She had lived enough years close to men who wore ink like that to know it was not decoration. A koi on the throat was a sentence in a language she'd once slept beside. It said what he was before he could. It said this floor, this suite, the green light her badge should never have gotten. All of it belonged to a world the hospital rented out and pretended not to see. Jasmine's whole training took over before her fear could. Hey, eyes on me. She was already across the room, already on her knees in his blood, hands going to the wound. I'm a nurse. Move your hand. Let me see it. He moved his hand, not because she'd told him to, because his eyes had come up, and they were black and cold and analytical even now, even here, and they had found her badge, her name, her face, and filed all three. He let her see the wound, and with the same motion, from somewhere she hadn't watched, he brought up a pistol and set the muzzle of it against the underside of her jaw. The metal was warm. He was that hot with fever. She felt it before she understood it, the cold ring of the muzzle, then the heat of his skin radiating off the hand that held it. A man did not run a fever like that from a fresh wound. He had been bleeding into this room for hours. Someone had known and left him here, on a floor no one could reach, to either hold or not. You saw nothing, he said. His voice came low and shredded, an accent underneath it, breath short. He got the barrel higher against her jaw, forcing her chin up, pinning her with it, the way another man might pin someone against a door. Nothing. You walk out, you forget the floor. Jasmine did not scream. She did not pull back. Both would have been the reasonable animal thing, and she did neither, and some remote part of her would wonder about that later. She looked at the wound instead of the gun. Left flank, low. The bleeding steady and dark, rather than bright and pumping. Venous, not arterial, which meant he had minutes and not seconds, which meant he was going to bleed to death slowly and stupidly on a carpet while holding a weapon on the one person in the building trying to stop it. She catalogued it the way she catalogued everything, fast and cold. Entry, no exit she could see, no field dressing, no one else in the room. Whoever had done this to him had been thorough. Whoever was supposed to save him had not come. "That's a 9mm under my jaw," she said. Her voice came out level. It surprised her more than him, and that's about a pint of you on this floor. Pull that trigger, and the noise brings the whole hospital down here. Don't pull it, and you bleed out in 20 minutes, because your hand is not a dressing. She put her palm flat against the wound, and pressed, hard, and felt him flinch through the whole mass of him. Either way, you don't make it to sunrise, so. His eyes moved over her face. Fever bright, but reading. The gun stayed where it was. She could feel his pulse under her palm through his side, too fast and going thin at the edges, the rhythm of a body starting to give up its argument. His jaw worked once. Whatever calculation ran behind those eyes, it was a man's whole life of deciding who lived, turned now on himself, and running out of time to finish. "You're not deciding whether to trust me," Jasmine said, quiet. Her hand did not leave the wound. "Your body already decided. It decided when it let me press this hard, and you didn't stop me. The gun is the only part of you still arguing." She wrapped her free hand around the warm barrel, slow, and moved it a few degrees off her jaw, and he let her, and that was the whole answer. "Jinja, put it down." The Korean word came out of her without permission, dredged up from a life she didn't talk about, and it did something to his face. A flicker, there and gone, surprise landing where fear should have been. Jasmine kept her hand on his side and met the black of his eyes and did not blink. "Put it down," she said, "and sit up straight so I can reach the wound. Now." For a long second, the gun stayed where it was. Then Kang Min-jae's fingers loosened, one at a time, and the weight of the pistol dropped into his lap. He pushed himself up against the side of the bed, jaw tight, and the movement pulled a fresh line of red through the black cotton at his flank. Jasmine watched the fabric darken. She pressed harder. "Both hands where I can see them," she said. "You move fast, you bleed faster." He set the gun on the carpet beside his thigh, palm flat over it. Not surrender, a pause. She looked past him, at the room, silk on the bed, untouched. A low table with a decanter and 2 glasses, one used. A phone face down near the lamp, and on the far wall, a panel of dark wood with a single black square set into it, at shoulder height. No handle, no seam she could see from the floor. She filed it away and went back to the wound. The shirt had to come off. She told him so. He unbuttoned what was left of the 4 already open, worked the soaked cotton off his shoulder with a slowness that had nothing to do with modesty and everything to do with the hole in his side. She helped him free the sleeve. The koi ran down his neck and disappeared under the collarbone, and below it, his whole left side was painted. She pressed the ball of gauze from her pocket into the entry and lifted, checking the back. No exit. The bullet was still in him. "It didn't go through," she said. "I know. You've done this before." He almost smiled. "So have you." She didn't answer that. She reached into the deep pocket of her coat and laid out what she had. A suture kit she'd pulled from the med cart on instinct, without letting herself name why. Lidocaine. A single field clamp. Not enough. Enough for tonight. "I can't take the bullet out here," she said. "Not clean. If I dig for it, I do more damage than it's doing sitting still. So I close the bleeder, I pack the wound, and it holds until someone with an OR gets to you." She threaded the needle without looking at him. "That's the deal. That's all of it. Who else knows you're down here?" "No one." The woman upstairs. Her hands went still for half a beat. He'd been listening then, even bleeding out on the floor. He'd heard Loretta's name in whatever she'd said before she came down, or he'd guessed the shape of her night from the coat and the ID, and the exhaustion sitting under her eyes. "She knows I went looking for morphine," Jasmine said. "She doesn't know what I found. Keep it that way and you both stay clean." Somewhere above them, a pipe knocked and settled. He turned his head toward the sound, then back to her. When he spoke again, his voice had dropped, and the Korean came out of him without ceremony, low and fast, testing her. She caught most of it. Something about whether she understood what this room was, whether she understood what he was. "I understand enough," she answered, in English, and pushed the needle through the first edge of skin. He inhaled through his teeth. She'd offered the lidocaine and he'd waved it off, so she worked without it now, and the only sound he made was that one breath. She tied the first knot, cut, moved to the second. Her hands were steady in a way the rest of her wasn't. This was the part of the world she owned. A wound was a problem with a sequence, and she knew the sequence, and while her fingers followed it, the fear had nowhere to sit. He watched her the whole time. Not the way men usually watched her. Not down the front of the scrub. He watched her hands, and then he watched her face, and something behind his eyes was working through a problem of its own, as if a woman kneeling in his blood who gave him orders instead of begging for her life were a category he did not have a slot for. "Most people," he said, "would have run. Most people can't sew. That isn't why." She tied off the bleeder, and the flow at the wound slowed to a seep. She let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding, and reached for the packing gauze. "My grandmother taught me you finish what's in front of you," she said. "You can be scared later." She fed the gauze in with 2 fingers. "This is going to hurt more than the stitching." It did. His hand closed into a fist against the carpet, knuckles pale, and stayed there. He didn't reach for the gun. That was the thing she noticed, packing his side while he could have ended her in a second. The gun stayed on the floor under his open palm, and he let it. "Talk," she said. "It keeps your breathing even. Tell me why a man with a floor like this ends up bleeding out on it alone." He was quiet long enough that she thought he wouldn't. Then, "Because I trusted a room to be empty when it wasn't. Someone you knew. Someone I fed." His jaw worked. "There's a difference between the two, and I forgot it for an hour. That's all it takes. An hour." She threaded a second bite of gauze into the wound and felt him tense against it. "So the man who did this walked out the same door I walked in." He did. His eyes tracked to the mahogany, and the door let him, the way it let you. Something cooled in his voice. "Doors here open for the right badges. You should ask yourself, whose badge opened this one for you tonight?" She didn't have an answer for that, and she didn't like that she didn't. Her own low-clearance ID had lit that lock green when it should have refused her. She'd told herself it was a glitch. Sitting in his blood, she stopped telling herself that. "Later," she said, "because the wound came first. Because the wound always came first. Breathe." He breathed. She worked. For a while, the only sounds in the room were the wet click of the packing and the tick of the platinum watch still on his wrist. And outside somewhere, the building waking up around them, oblivious, ordinary, a whole hospital that had no idea what its 3rd floor was. By the time she taped the dressing down, the window behind the silk drapes had gone from black to the bruised gray that comes before a city dawn. She sat back on her heels. Her knees ached. Her scrub was stiff with drying blood, hers now as much as his, and she thought of the patient in 1108, and the morphine she still didn't have, and the hour she'd lost, and none of it seemed to belong to the same life as this room. "You need blood," she said. "You need imaging. You need a surgeon who won't ask questions, and if you don't have one of those, you need a hospital. And if you go to a hospital with a gunshot wound, the police come in 20 minutes. That's the whole map. I've done what I can." She started to gather the wrappers, the used needle, the evidence of herself. He spoke one word, quiet. Stay. I have patients upstairs. You have one patient who matters right now. She looked at him. You're not my patient. You're a man on a floor that doesn't exist. And in an hour, my shift ends and I go home to a woman who needs me more than you do. Something shifted in his face at that. Not softness, but attention, sharpening. He reached with his good arm, not for her, for the phone. He turned it over, thumbed it once, and held it to his ear. Do-yoon. The name meant nothing to her yet. She kept packing her bag. He spoke in Korean, clipped, 3 sentences, and she caught her own name in the middle of them. Brooks. He said it carefully, the way you say a word you intend to use again. Then he lowered the phone and looked at her with the flat certainty of a man who had never in his life been told no, and meant it. Someone is coming for you, he said. Her stomach dropped. Coming for me how? To thank you. A pause. And to make sure you get home. She didn't trust it, but she was too tired to run, and there was nowhere on this floor to run to, and the black square on the far wall was a camera. She understood that now, and it had watched her come in. Whatever this was, it already had her face. The mahogany door opened without a knock. The man who stepped through was tall, lean, dressed in a black suit with no tie, an earpiece coiled at his collar, and leather gloves on both hands. He took in the room in one pass, the blood, the dressing, the woman kneeling, his boss upright and breathing, and something in his shoulders came down half an inch. He crossed to Min-jae, dropped to a knee, and spoke low. Min-jae answered in 2 words. The man's eyes went to Jasmine and stayed. You're the nurse, he said. His English was clean, careful. I'm going home. Not through the lobby. He stood. There are cameras between here and the street that I control, and there is one in this room that I don't. He glanced at the black square on the wall, and for the first time, she saw the boss and the bodyguard share a look that had weight in it. That camera was a problem neither of them had put there. Do-yoon, Min-jae said. The floor. I'll handle the floor. Do-yoon crouched again, sliding an arm under his boss's shoulder. You should not be sitting up. She told me to sit up. Do-yoon looked at Jasmine a second time, and this time, there was something almost like a question in it. Then he got Min-jae to his feet, and the big man swayed and steadied, one hand braced on the wall over the fresh dressing, and stood there breathing like a swimmer between waves. You did good work, Do-yoon said to her, and it did not sound like flattery. It sounded like a man logging a fact he would need later. She gathered the last of her things and stood, her legs held. He needs a surgeon by tonight. The bullet still in him, upper left flank, no exit. I closed a vein. I didn't fix anything. You understand the difference? I understand the difference. Then get him one. She slung her bag. And leave me out of the rest. Neither man answered that, and their silence told her everything about how much weight her preference carried here. Do-yoon walked her to the door, down the warm carpeted hall she was never supposed to see, to a service elevator she hadn't known existed. He pressed a floor with a gloved thumb. You'll come out by the staff lot, he said. Go home. Sleep. A beat. Say nothing. Not because we'll hurt you, because the people who did this to him would hurt you, and you'd never see them coming. The doors closed on his face. She got the patient in 11:08 his morphine at 5:52, 40 minutes late, from the general ward stock that Loretta signed out under her own name without a single question. One look at Jasmine's ruined scrub, and Loretta had simply said, Go change, baby, I've got this floor, and asked nothing else. That was the kind of thing that made a debt. Jasmine changed in the locker room and balled the bloody teal into a plastic bag and shoved it to the bottom of her locker like a body. She went home. Her grandmother's apartment smelled of the tea she drank for the nausea, and the woman was asleep in the chair by the window, with the dialysis schedule printed and taped to the lamp where she could see it, Saturday circled in red. Jasmine sat on the floor beside the chair for a while without waking her. Then she went to bed and did not dream. 30 hours later, the transfer paperwork was in her file. She found out the way you find out about weather. A memo, a signature already dry. Dr. Jasmine Brooks, reassigned from VIP nursing to private off-site duty, effective immediately, at the written request of a client whose name did not appear anywhere on the form. Full salary continued, benefits continued, her grandmother's insurance authorization, the one that had been pending for 3 weeks, cleared that same afternoon. Dialysis moved back to Thursday. She read the 2 documents side by side on the bus and understood that she had not been asked. She'd been bought. Gently, expensively, and without a word. Prescott signed the transfer. That was the part that turned in her like a screw. His initials sat in the corner of the memo, the same fountain pen hand that had written her up for the morphine count, and she could not make the 2 facts lie flat. The man who wanted her gone, signing the paper that gave her away to the exact floor he'd built to hide. She held that thought at arm's length. It had teeth, and she wasn't ready to be bitten yet. The car came for her on a Tuesday. Not a hospital shuttle. A black sedan with tinted glass and Do-yoon in the front seat, gloves and all, who opened the rear door and said only, "He's not healing the way you said he should." They drove out of the city, north, until the buildings thinned and a wall appeared. Real wall, stone, running along the road for longer than any house should need, and then a gate, and then a house that was not a house but a compound wearing a house's face. They took her through rooms designed to make a person feel small. She didn't give them the satisfaction. She'd spent 3 years walking into rooms where rich men expected her to shrink, and she'd learned to walk straight down the center of them. They'd put him in a bedroom the size of her grandmother's whole apartment, in a bed he clearly hated, with 2 men standing against the wall who were not medical and did not leave when she entered. Min-jae looked worse. Gray under the gold of his skin, a sheen on his forehead, the dressing at his side spotted through. She crossed to him, set her bag down, and put the back of her hand to his cheek before she said a single word. "You have a fever," she said. "Since when?" "Yesterday." "And no one called a surgeon." "The surgeon came." His voice had lost some of its floor. He took the bullet out. He said it was clean. "It isn't clean. Clean doesn't do this." She peeled the tape. The wound underneath was angry, the edges tight and hot, and she knew infection when she smelled it. She straightened and turned to the room, to the 2 men at the wall, to Do-yoon in the doorway, to all the money and all the guns that hadn't been able to do what a needle and a woman's steady hands had done on a bathroom floor. "Everyone out," she said. Nobody moved. One of the wall men looked at Min-jae, waiting for the order that would put her back in her place. Min-jae looked at her instead, at the hand that had checked his fever without asking permission, at the spine that hadn't bent once since she'd walked in. And then he did the thing that would be repeated in that house for weeks after, in low voices, as proof that something had come loose in the boss. "You heard her," he said. "Out." They went. Do-yoon last, pulling the door shut, and just before it closed, his eyes met Jasmine's, and there was no threat in them anymore, only a kind of careful, watching respect, the look of a man revising every assumption he'd walked in with. The room emptied. The fortress with its wall and its gate and its armed men arranged itself, for one impossible minute, around the authority of a woman it had bought to keep quiet. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The house held its breath on the other side of the door. "You could have refused to come," he said. "I could have." She snapped a glove on. "My grandmother's dialysis moved back to Thursday, the same day your paperwork moved me here. Her insurance cleared the same afternoon. You want to tell me that's a coincidence? Or do you want me to keep pretending I don't know how I ended up standing in your bedroom?" He watched her, and for once he was the one with no answer ready. "I don't take gifts I can't pay back," she said, "so I'm going to fix your side." and then we're even, and then you're going to let her keep her Thursdays whether I'm here or not. That's the price. Nod if you understand it." A long beat. Then he nodded, the small, exact nod of a man who had spent his life setting terms, and had just, for the first time in a long time, been handed one. She got clean instruments out of her bag. She'd come prepared this time. She'd known, somehow, that healing wrong would be the phrase. She laid out antibiotics she'd requisitioned under a story that would hold, and a fresh field, and she rolled her sleeves. "This is going to hurt," she said, "and you're going to hold still, and you're not going to call anyone in here to watch you flinch." "I don't flinch." "You will." She pressed her stethoscope to his chest first, out of habit, before she opened the wound, listening for the wet crackle that would tell her the infection had reached deeper than his side. She found his lungs clear. She found something else. Under the diaphragm of the scope, his heart was going far too fast for a man lying still, hammering against his ribs in a rhythm that had nothing to do with the fever, and everything to do with how close her head was bent to his. She heard it. She knew exactly what she was hearing. She kept her face flat, moved the scope to his side, and said nothing at all. But she left her hand on his chest a half-second longer than the exam required, and felt the pulse jump under her palm, and understood, with the same cold clarity she brought to a bleeder, that whatever this thing was between them, it had already stopped being about a wound. Outside the door, Do-yoon stood with his back to the wall and his phone in his gloved hand, staring at a message that had just come in from the man he'd left to sweep the hospital's third floor. A single line about the camera in the mahogany suite, about who its feed belonged to. He read it twice. Then he put the phone away and told no one, because the name on the screen was one that changed the whole shape of the night, and he needed to be certain before he carried it to a man with a fever and a gun and a nurse he'd just handed the run of the house. The wound looked better on the third evening, and that was the problem, because Jasmine had learned to distrust anything that improved on schedule in a house with this many locked doors. She peeled the dressing back under the lamp. The edges were pink now, closing, the infection retreating the way she'd promised it would. Min-jae watched her hands and not her face. He had been watching her hands for 3 days, as if they were the only part of her that made sense to him. "Clean," she said. "You'll keep the leg you were worried about losing." "I was not worried about the leg." She pressed fresh gauze down and taped it. "Everybody's worried about something." He almost smiled. She was learning the shape of it, the way one corner of his mouth moved, before the rest of him decided whether to allow it. She capped the antiseptic, stripped her gloves, dropped them in the bin she'd made Do-yoon bring up on the first day, because a man healing in a bedroom needed a bedroom that behaved like a room where healing happened. Down the hall, a phone rang once and stopped. She noted it and let it go. Phones rang in this house all night. Men she never saw moved through the lower floors on schedules she wasn't meant to understand, and she had decided early that the fastest way to lose her mind in a place like this was to try to read every sound. She read the ones that touched her patient. The rest she let pass like weather. She didn't think about it. She was thinking about her grandmother, about Thursday, about the dialysis chair that had finally been honored 2 weeks running, about how strange it was to owe a criminal for the only stretch of peace her family had known this year. She rolled the cart toward the door. The lights died. Not a flicker. Not the brown sag of a circuit under load. Everything, at once. The lamp, the hallway glow beneath the door, the small green eye of the monitor she'd rigged to track his pulse. Full dark. The kind of dark that has weight, that presses on the eyes and makes them invent shapes. Jasmine stopped with her hand on the cart. "Do-yoon," Min-jae said. Not loud. A name laid down like a card. Nothing answered. No generator cough, no backup strip snapping to life along the baseboards. A house like this had backups. A house like this had backups for the backups. She knew that the way she knew a flat line from a lead that had slipped, by the wrongness of the silence where a sound should be. Her eyes reached for anything and found nothing. She turned her head toward the window, and there was no window, only the memory of where it should be. The house had swallowed even the city. That was the detail that told her the most. A room this high, in a city that never fully went dark, and not one thread of skyline bled through the curtains. Someone had thought about the windows in this house the way other people thought about locks. She heard the sheets move. "Stay down," she said. He didn't. She heard his weight shift to the edge of the mattress, heard the breath he took to stand, the deliberate breath of a man overriding his own body, and she crossed the dark with both hands out. "Min Jae, the floor is a straight line to your femoral. You do not get up." Someone cut the power at the box. His voice had dropped register, gone flat and fast. "That is not an accident. That is a door being opened." Then Do-yoon opens it, not you. Her palm found his shoulder. He was already up most of the way, a wall of heat and effort, and she felt the exact second his body betrayed him. The small buckle at the knee, the breath that snagged, the hand that shot out for a headboard that wasn't where his memory had left it. 3 days flat had rewritten his balance, and the dark had stolen the map. He went down. She went with him, because letting a 200-pound man fall free onto a healing flank was how you undid a week of work in 1 second. She got a shoulder under his arm and turned the fall into a lower, slower thing, and they landed hard against the side of the bed, her back to the frame, his weight half across her. "Talk to me," she said. "Where's the pain?" He didn't answer. That was the first flag. Min Jae answered everything, even the questions he refused, even if the answer was only the silence he chose on purpose. This silence he had not chosen. His chest was moving too fast under her hand, fast and shallow and climbing, each breath shorter than the one before it, stacking on top of each other, with no room left underneath. She pressed 2 fingers to the side of his throat, over the koi she could not see and did not need to. His pulse was sprinting. His skin had gone damp and cold at once. "Bleeding," she said, and got her hand to his flank. The dressing was dry. The wound held. It wasn't the wound. It was the dark, and the box being opened, and a body that had spent its whole life being the most dangerous thing in every room, now trapped flat and blind and unable to stand. She had seen it in soldiers. She had seen it in the mothers of dying children, the chest that forgets how to be a chest. The mind, in those bodies, was always the last to understand it wasn't dying. You could show a man his own clean scan, and his lungs would still fight him. The animal underneath didn't read charts. It only knew the dark had teeth, and it climbed toward the surface, no matter how many times the surface said, "Stay down." She had never once talked a body out of the panic by explaining it. She had only ever talked it out breath by breath, borrowing the person's attention 1 second at a time until the seconds outnumbered the fear. So she stopped trying to reason with him. Reason was the wrong tool for a drowning man. "Listen to me," she said. "Your wound is closed. You are not bleeding out. Your body is lying to you right now, and I need you to let me be the one who tells the truth." "The door," the word came out cracked. Do-yoon has the door. She had no idea if that was true. She said it like a vital sign. "Your job is this. Your only job. In through your nose. On my count." His hand found her wrist in the dark and closed around it. Not to move it. To hold on. The grip of a man who had put a gun under her chin 4 nights ago, now shaking against her pulse like the wrist was the last solid thing in the world. Down the hall, faint, something heavy struck a wall. Then a sound she knew and hated. The short, wet cough of a suppressed round. Once, twice. Somewhere below them the house was being fought over in the dark. and she was on the floor of a bedroom with the reason for the fight coming apart in her arms. She put her mouth close to his ear so the words would carry through the panic and nothing else would. 4 seconds in. Hold. 6 out. With me. She breathed it against his temple. She made her own chest do the thing she wanted his to do. Slow and deliberate and unhurried. The smooth, even rhythm she'd used on 100 patients who thought they were dying and were only afraid. Aigu, she thought, not saying it. This enormous man, this whole terrible kingdom of a man, and it comes down to teaching him to breathe on a floor. In, she said. 2, 3, 4, hold. His breath jerked, missed, caught. 6 out. Slow, you're not running. Nobody's running. The first breath was a failure. It came too fast and broke in the middle, and he made a sound low in his throat that no one else in this house would ever be permitted to hear him make. She didn't flinch from it. She counted through it. Again. In. 2, 3, 4. The second was less of a failure. The third caught somewhere in the middle and held. Good. That one was real. 6 out. I do not, he started. You don't have to talk. Talking is running. Just the count. By the 5th cycle, his exhale had lengthened past his inhale, which was the whole trick of it, the thing the body cannot panic through. His grip on her wrist stayed exactly as tight. She let it. She kept her own breath slow and enormous beside his ear, an anchor he could steer by, and she counted into the dark and felt the sprint under her fingers begin, slowly, to lose its edge. She lost track of how long. Time in the dark had come loose from the clock. There was only the count and the wrist and the great cold weight of him leaning into the one place in the world he'd decided was safe, and the slow arithmetic of a pulse coming down from 140 to 120 to something a body could live inside. Footsteps came up the hall, quick, controlled, a rhythm she'd learned in 3 days. She had her free hand flat on the floor before she'd decided to move it, ready to shove them both toward the far side of the bed. But the knock was 2 and then 1, and Min Jae's body registered it before her mind did. Some of the iron came back into him. Do Yoon, he said. Rough. Alive. The door opened on a phone's flashlight, a cold blue cone that found them on the floor. Do Yoon took it in, his boss down, the nurse braced under him, her hand at his throat, and Jasmine watched the man do the fastest arithmetic she'd ever seen a face perform, and come out believing the right thing. 2 men, Do Yoon said, in the East Service stair, handled. The box was cut from outside the wall. They knew where it was. Then they had the plans, Min Jae said. They had the plans. Nobody said the next part. The next part sat in the blue light with them. Only a handful of people had the plans to this house, and every one of them was supposed to be loved. Do Yoon's jaw worked once. Jasmine watched him decide something and undecide it, watched his eyes flick to her and then away, and she filed it. The same small tell she'd caught in men at the hospital who knew a diagnosis before the family did. He was holding something. He had been holding it for days, and the dark had almost made him drop it, and now he was folding it back up because she was in the room. Get him up, Jasmine said, slowly. He stands when I say, not before. They moved him back onto the bed together, and she was already reading him with her hands. Pulse, skin, the dressing, the depth of each breath, running the checklist that had kept her upright through the whole night of her life, because the checklist was the only place the fear had nowhere to sit. His numbers were climbing back toward something she'd allow. The panic had crested and broken. What was left was the low tremor of a body coming down off its own alarm. Do Yoon stepped out to put men on the door. The flashlight went with him, and the dark came back, softer now, cut by a strip of moon at the curtain's edge. Min Jae's breathing had steadied. She kept 2 fingers at his wrist longer than the count required. You can let go now, she said. he didn't. His hand stayed on her wrist. In the near dark, she could just find the shape of his face, turned toward her. The eyes she knew were black, even when she couldn't see them. "When the lights went out," he said, and stopped. He was a man who did not lose sentences. He lost this one, and started it again from a different place. "I have been shot before, twice. I have been cut. I was not afraid of any of it. I know. Tonight I could not stand." The words came slow, each one set down with care, as if he were suturing something himself and would not rush the stitch. "A man came into my house to finish what the Mogno room started, and I could not stand. And the only thing in the dark that did not want something from me was your voice counting." That's the panic talking. It says big things. In the morning I do not talk when panic talks. You know this about me by now. His grip shifted, not tighter, just surer. "Whatever is left of me, however long it runs, it is yours. Not owed, not traded, yours." She had been offered things by powerful men before, in the hallways of a hospital that ran on their money. Offered gratitude, offered envelopes, offered the kind of attention that always came with a hook inside it. She knew the weight of a gift that was really a leash. This had no weight like that. He'd said it the way a man reports a fact he cannot change, and has stopped trying to. That was what made it hard to answer. A leash she could have refused, a fact she could only sit inside. "You almost died on a floor an hour ago," she said finally. "Men say things on the floor. I have never said this on any floor." His breath was even now, level under her hand, and the levelness made the words heavier, not lighter. "You could walk out that door in the morning and go back to your grandmother and your Thursdays and never see this house again, and it would still be true. That is the part you do not understand yet. It does not need you to stay to be true." The house ticked around them, cooling, the way a body cools. Somewhere below, men were dragging away the two who had come to kill him. Somewhere across the city, an old woman slept with a dialysis schedule taped to a lamp because this man had made a phone call. Jasmine sat on the floor of a fortress with his pulse under her fingers and did not pull her hand away, and that, not the words, was the answer, and they both heard it. She made her voice even. "The man who cut your power knew where the box was, knew the plans, knew which stair." Yes. Same way somebody's camera was already in the Mogno room before you ever bled in it. She wasn't asking. She was walking it forward, one stone at a time, the way she'd walked a name and an address into the zippered pocket of her bag on a night that felt like a year ago. "Somebody's been standing behind this since before I opened the wrong door. Somebody with keys to your house and mine." In the dark, she felt him go still in a new way. Not the panic still of an hour ago, but the still of a predator that has finally caught the direction of a scent. "Do-yoon has a name," Min-jae said quietly. "He has been holding it for 2 days. I saw it on his face when he came in tonight, and he did not say it in front of you. Then make him say it. In the morning. You keep saying morning like it's a place you're sure you'll get to." She kept her voice low and even, the same instrument she'd used on his lungs, because she could feel him wanting to pull authority back over himself like a coat, and she needed him to stay in the truth a little longer. Somebody just proved they can reach into this house and turn off the lights whenever they choose. Somebody sat behind a camera and watched you bleed and did nothing, because a live one was worth more to them than a dead one that night. That's not a rival, Min-jae. A rival kills you. This is a partner. This is someone who's been feeding you to the thing that's hunting you and collecting on both ends. The stillness that came off him then was total. She'd handed him the shape of it and he was turning it in the dark, and she could feel the moment the shape stopped being a suspicion and became a certainty he'd been refusing for days. "In the morning," he said a third time, and now the words meant something else. Not delay, but a vow with a date on it. "No," she found his eyes in the dark. Whoever it is knew this house would go dark tonight. Whoever it is isn't waiting for morning. And the last person who sent me somewhere on purpose signed the paper with a gold fountain pen. The words landed. She heard them land, the small catch in his breath that had nothing to do with panic this time. She had been carrying that contradiction for days, the one she'd pushed away because it was too ugly to hold. The director who wanted her gone had signed the transfer that handed her to the client on the hidden floor. The man who humiliated her over 2 missing vials had unlocked her grandmother's insurance in a single afternoon. Nobody does a stranger a kindness that size. Somebody had needed her exactly where she ended up. "Say the name you're both thinking," she said. Min-jae's hand finally left her wrist. Not to let go of her. To reach, in the dark, and press a small hard button on the underside of the nightstand she hadn't known was there, and along the far wall, a seam of light appeared, where she'd have sworn there was only wall, a door she had walked past 30 times. "Not here," he said. "There is a room in this house they cannot cut the power to. We will have the name where no one can hear it, and no light can be taken from us. Help me stand." She got her shoulder back under his arm. He was heavy in a new way, not the dead weight of the fall, but the deliberate lean of a man testing whether his body would hold him this time. She braced her heels against the carpet and gave him a fixed point. "On 3 you stand," she said. "Not on 2. You've been trying to live 2 seconds ahead of your own body all night, and that's exactly how you ended up on this floor. 1, 2. She felt him wait. It cost him something to wait. That was the whole lesson of the night, pressed into a single breath, that the most dangerous man she'd ever touched had just learned to hold still 1 count longer because she told him to. 3. This time when she said now, he rose with her, slow and whole, the 2 of them moving toward the thin gold seam in the wall, while below them, the house went quiet, and the moon held the curtain, and somewhere, a gold fountain pen was, at that exact hour, signing something else. The panic room breathed its own air, cool and filtered, and the light came up soft the moment the door sealed behind them. Steel under the wood. Jasmine felt it in the change of sound. The house went far away, the whole world went far away, and there was only this box, and the 2 of them inside it. She lowered Min-jae onto the low bench along the wall. His weight came down slow, controlled, the way she had taught him. 3 seconds. He waited for the count now without being told. Do-yoon came in last and stood with his back to the sealed door, phone in his gloved hand. He had not put it away since the message 2 days ago. He held it like it might bite. "Say it," Min-jae said. Do-yoon looked at Jasmine. "She stays," Min-jae said. "She earned the room." Do-yoon turned the phone so the screen faced his chief. Jasmine did not lean in to read it. She watched their faces instead, because faces tell the truth a half-second before mouths agree to it. "The camera in the mahogany suite," Do-yoon said. "The feed doesn't route to us. It never did. It routes to a private server. The billing on that server, the ambush team that came through the same door, the crew that cut the box outside the east stairs tonight, all of it runs through one shell account." "Whose?" "Prescott, Walter Prescott." The name landed and did not echo. There was nowhere for it to go in a sealed room. It just sat there between them, heavy, final. Jasmine felt the pieces she had carried for days turn and lock. The badge that opened doors it should have refused. The renovation with no dust. The transfer memo in gold fountain ink. She had tearized the shape of a partner in the dark, and here was the partner's face, and it was a face she had stood in front of at 3 in the morning, while it called her a woman who needed money too much to be trusted. Min-jae was quiet, then, low, almost to himself. "The director." "Hospital director," Do-yoon said. "And he isn't Bakek's enemy. He's Bakek's partner, silent one. Bakek runs the muscle, Prescott runs the paper. The 3rd floor, the rooms with no numbers. Prescott leases them to Bakek and washes the money through the hospital foundation. Charitable donations, renovation budgets. He almost smiled and did not. 11 months of renovation, with no dust. Jasmine heard the last piece slide home in her own chest before either man said it. He signed my transfer, she said. Both men looked at her. The same pen that wrote me up for the morphine count wrote the order that sent me here. She kept her voice flat, clinical. The voice she used to name a wound out loud, so nobody could pretend it wasn't there. My badge shouldn't have opened that door, low clearance. It opened because somebody wanted a body on that floor that night. Somebody who could be blamed if it went wrong. Min Jae's jaw moved. He sent you to the room I was bleeding in. He sent a nurse who owes money and counts short 2 vials. If you'd died, there was a woman on camera kneeling in your blood, with a record already open against her. She turned her hand over, looked at her own palm as if the answer were written there. I wasn't supposed to save you. I was supposed to be found next to you. The room held that. Do-yoon lowered the phone. The camera caught her going in. Prescott has that footage. He's been sitting on it. Then he's been building 2 graves, Min Jae said. Mine and hers. He put his good hand flat on the bench and pushed himself up, slow, the count moving behind his eyes. He stood whole. He stood the way a man stands when he has stopped being a patient and remembered what he is. Do-yoon. Sir. The billing account. You have the routing? Everything. The shell, the foundation, the offshore leg, the names of the board members Bake bought. Then we don't send men tonight. He said it like a door closing. Bake wants a war. Prescott wants a war he can hide behind. We don't give either of them a body to point at. He looked at Jasmine. We take the money, all of it. A man like Bak is a fist. Cut the arm and the fist is nothing. A man like Prescott is a signature. Take away what the signature is worth and there's nothing left of him at all. Jasmine said nothing. But she did not look away, and Min Jae had learned to read that too. It took 9 days. Jasmine kept the wound honest through all of it. The drain, the packing, the slow rows of new tissue closing over the flank where the bullet had lived. She changed his dressings in a house that had gone very quiet and very busy at the same time. Phones ringing once and stopping, cars leaving in the dark, Do-yoon in and out with a leather folder that got thicker each day. She did not ask what was in it. She knew enough. She had said so the first night with a gun under her chin, and it was still true. The bloody scrub was still at the bottom of her locker at the hospital. She thought of it once, standing at his bedside with fresh gauze in her hands, and understood she did not need to hide it anymore. The thing she had buried as evidence against herself had become evidence against the man who tried to bury her. She would burn it, or she would frame it. She hadn't decided which. Each morning she checked the flank, pressed the edges, watched the color. Each morning it answered her better than the last. He healed the way he did everything now, on her count, without argument, a man who had handed over the one thing he never handed to anyone, and found the world had not ended. On the 4th day her grandmother's Thursday dialysis went through without a hold. On the 6th day it went through again. Jasmine checked the app in the hallway and put the phone away and said nothing, but her shoulders came down half an inch and stayed there. On the 7th day, Loretta Vance called her. There's men in suits going through the foundation books, Loretta said, low, the way you talk when you're pretending to read a chart. Federal men. Prescott hasn't come in. Nobody's seen him in 2 days. A pause. Baby, the night you came up bloody, and I signed that morphine under my own name, and asked you nothing, I want you to know, I'd sign it again. But something's happening in this building, and I think it's happening around you. It's happening for me, Jasmine said, not around me. Silence on the line. Then Loretta, softer. You always did carry more than they gave you credit for. I have to go, Loretta. Thursday's covered. Grandma's Thursday is covered. I know, baby. That's how I knew it was you. She hung up. She had not answered the debt with words. She had answered it by making sure the woman who covered her would never take the fall for those 2 vials. Do-yoon's folder had a page for that too. The morphine discrepancy, the real one, the diverted narcotics feeding the 3rd floor, traced back to Prescott's own supply chain. The 2 vials that were supposed to hang around Jasmine's neck now hung around his. Baek Sang-hoon went first, because money is faster than men. Jasmine never saw him. She only saw what falling looked like from the outside. Do-yoon at the long table in the mansion office, working a phone in Korean, moving accounts the way she moved sutures, 1 clean pass at a time. The offshore leg froze. The board members who had taken Baek's money got a visit from people who explained, without raising their voices, exactly which of their own secrets were now for sale. The muscle Baek paid stopped getting paid, a fist with no arm. The last she heard of Baek Sang-hoon, he was a man in a leather coat standing in an empty office that used to be full, and there was no one left to answer his calls. The scar over his brow, the gold chains, the rings that had weighed his fists, none of it meant anything now. He had come at Min-jae through the dark, through a cut power box and a betrayer inside the house, and he had bet everything on a war of men. Min-jae had answered with a war of numbers, and Baek had never learned to fight in that language. Prescott took longer, because a signature fights differently than a fist. He tried the footage first. Do-yoon had expected it. The morning the federal men opened the foundation books, an anonymous file reached them, the full server, every camera on the 3rd floor, 11 months of men with no names, carrying packages into rooms with no numbers. The single clip Prescott had been saving, the one of a nurse in a teal scrub kneeling in blood, arrived in a much longer film. In context, it did not show a thief. It showed a woman treating a wounded man in a room the hospital director had built to hide wounded men. He tried the board next. The board had already read the same pages Do-yoon read. They did the arithmetic that frightened people do. How much of this touches me? And they moved away from Walter Prescott the way water moves away from a stone dropped in it. He tried the police after that, or something dressed as the police, a lawyer with a soft voice who called the mansion once. Do-yoon took the call. Do-yoon spoke for 90 seconds in the flat, courteous English he used when a thing was already decided, and the lawyer did not call again. There was nothing to negotiate. Min-jae had not broken a law that could be found. He had bought a distressed building at a fair price from a fleeing board and put a nurse's name on the deed. Everything ugly in the story led back through Prescott's own pen, and a man cannot subpoena his own signature into innocence. He came to the mansion himself, at the end. That, Jasmine saw. She was in the office doorway when the car came through the gate. Do-yoon let him walk in alone. Prescott in his charcoal suit and gold-rimmed glasses, the fountain pen still in his breast pocket, and the pen was the only steady thing on him. His hands shook. His starched coat was gone. He was just a thin, upright man who had run out of paper. He looked at Min-jae, who sat behind the desk now, dressed in black, heeled, the koi rising up his neck as he turned his head. Then he looked at Jasmine, and something crossed his face, the calculation of a man realizing which piece on the board he had misjudged. "You," Prescott said. "Me," Jasmine said. "I built that arrangement over 9 years." His voice tried for the old contempt and could not lift it. "You walked into it in one night." "You walked me into it," she said. "You gave a low-clearance badge the run of that floor because you needed someone to blame. You picked a woman with a sick grandmother and a short count because you thought she'd be easy to bury. She stepped into the room. She was not loud. She had never once been loud. You should have picked someone who couldn't sew." Prescott turned to Min-jae, and now the fear came out plain. "I can testify. I have names, Baek's people, the board. I can give you all of it. I can." "You gave it already," Min-jae said. "You gave it to the federal men this morning. You just didn't know your own hands were the ones holding the pen. He rose, whole, tall. You're not here to bargain. You're here because you have nowhere else the car could take you. He nodded at the door. Go. The men waiting for you at your house aren't mine. Mine would have been kinder. Prescott's mouth opened. Nothing came. He took the fountain pen out of his pocket without seeming to know he did it, turned it once in his shaking fingers, the little habit of a man who had signed away other people's lives with it for years, and then he put it back, and he left. The gate closed behind the car. Jasmine never saw him again either. That should have been the end. A wound closed, an enemy gone, a debt paid. But there was one more page in Do-yoon's folder, and Min-jae had been holding it the way she had held the gun barrel that first night, carefully, waiting for the right angle. The hospital deed. The foundation that owned the building was in free fall, its board scattered, its director disgraced, its books open to the federal men. A thing like that gets sold in the dark, fast, to whoever can make the noise stop. Min-jae could make the noise stop. He did not tell Jasmine until the papers were done. He called her into the office on the 9th day. The leather folder was open on the desk. He turned it toward her the way Do-yoon had turned the phone in the panic room. The gesture of a man who has stopped hiding things from her. She read it. She read it twice. The way she read the count that first night. The way she read the transfer memo. Slow, checking for the trick. There was no trick. The deed to the building, the whole hospital, the VIP wing, the general ward where her people ran short and tired, the 3rd floor with its rooms that would get numbers now, was written in her name. Dr. Jasmine Brooks. Not owed, not traded, hers. I can't take a hospital, she said. You didn't take it. I took it. From men who used it to hide bodies. He came around the desk. I'm giving it to the one person in that building who used it to save one. That's not how. She stopped, started again, and her voice was not quite steady, and she let it not be steady, because there was no camera in this room, and no gun, and no reason left to be only clinical. For 3 years she had learned to keep her face smooth, while men decided her hours, and her worth, and her grandmother's Thursdays. She had learned it so well she almost forgot she was doing it. She let it go now, one muscle at a time. The night you put a gun under my chin, you said I saw nothing. Do you remember what I said back? You told me to sit up. I told you to sit up. A breath. You said your life belonged to me. In the dark, when you couldn't stand. I never answered you. I know. I'm answering now. She set the folder down. She put her hand flat on the deed, on her own name. I don't want your life, Min-jae. I've spent 3 years keeping other people alive by the hour, and I know exactly what a life costs, and I would never let anyone hand me theirs like a receipt. She looked up. But I'll take the building, because in that building, I can keep 100 grandmothers on their Thursdays. That's mine to want. That, I'll take. Something in his face broke open that no bullet had reached. He did not say Jinja. He did not whisper anything in any language. He just looked at her the way a man looks at the one thing he did not expect to survive to see. Then it's yours, he said. The reopening was 6 weeks later. They cleaned the 3rd floor down to the studs. Real dust this time, real permits, real noise. The mahogany doors gone and replaced with doors that had numbers. The camera in the room where she had knelt in his blood came out of the wall with a screwdriver and a claw, and Jasmine watched them pull it, the little black square that had watched her the whole time, and she did not ask to keep it. The rooms with no numbers became rooms with beds for people who had never been able to afford a bed in a place like that. Jasmine had the teal and gold plaque taken off her own coat and put a different set of words over the general ward door instead, and Loretta Vance cried when she read them and pretended it was her allergies. The night of the reopening, they filled the atrium with the kind of people who had always owned rooms in that building. Chaebol money, city money, the board, the survivors of it, in the front, careful, watching the woman who now held their leases. Jasmine stood at the top of the wide stair in a dress instead of a scrub for the first time in 3 years, and her grandmother sat in the front row in a chair by the aisle, dialysis behind her, Thursday behind her, alive. Min Jae came in last, the way he always came in last, black shirt, the koi at his collar, heeled. The room went quiet around him the way rooms do around men like him. He crossed the marble to the foot of the stair, and every important person in that atrium watched to see what the koi would do, whether he would stand beside her, own her, claim the building through the woman whose name was on it. He did not stand beside her. He knelt. There, in front of the money and the board, and the whole careful world that had spent his kind and her kind like currency, Kang Min-jae went down on one knee. He took her hand, the hand that had packed his wound in the dark, the hand that had counted his breaths, the hand that now held the deed to the house they were standing in, and he bent his head, and he pressed his mouth to it. Not a proposal, something older than that. A man who owned everything, kneeling to the one person he had chosen not to own. Somewhere in the front row, her grandmother's hand came up to her mouth. Loretta Vance, standing near the ward door with the new words over her head, went very still. The board watched their leases bow. And Do-yoon, by the wall, allowed himself the smallest thing that had ever crossed his careful face. Not a smile, quite. The look of a man who had revised every assumption he arrived with and found the new math better than the old. The room did not understand. They would tell the story wrong for years, but the woman at the top of the stair understood, and that was the only place the truth ever needed to reach. She did not pull her hand back. She did not need to be clinical anymore. She kept it there. She felt the warmth of his mouth and the whole weight of a man who had once pressed a gun to her jaw and told her she had seen nothing, and she thought that she had, in fact, seen everything, and had not looked away once. She let him rise, on the count of 3. The applause found its own shape and then died the way applause always dies, in pieces, some hands stopping before others, until only 2 people near the back were still clapping, and then they stopped too. Jasmine stood at the top of the atrium stairs, with her hands still warm, and let the room become a room again. Below her, Kang Min-jae was on his feet. He straightened his cuff. He did not look at the crowd. He looked at her, once, the way a man checks that the ground is where he left it, and then he stepped aside so the light could reach the woman it had come for. She went down the stairs alone. Each step took her weight without argument. At the bottom, a photographer lifted his camera, and Do-yoon, near the wall, tilted his head half an inch. The photographer lowered the camera. Some pictures were not going to be taken tonight, and everyone in that atrium who mattered understood which ones. The grandmother waited in the front row in a chair that had been carried down from the 2nd floor because she would not use the wheelchair on a night like this. Her hands were folded in her lap over a program nobody had read. Jasmine crossed the marble and knelt in front of her, and it was a different kind of kneeling than the one the room had just witnessed. Lower, older, the kind a granddaughter learns before she learns anything else. "You came down the stairs like you owned them," the old woman said in Korean, because that was the language she scolded in. "I do own them," Jasmine said. The grandmother's mouth moved. It was not quite a smile. It was the thing a face does when a smile would cost too much, and the feeling insists anyway. She put one hand on the side of her granddaughter's face, the palm dry and light as paper, and held it there while the atrium pretended not to watch. "Your mother would have stood behind you tonight and pretended she wasn't crying," the old woman said. "I never learned to pretend. It's a young woman's skill. You raised me to do the crying quietly and the work loudly. I raised you to survive," the hand on her cheek pressed. Once, a small insistence. "Nobody told me you'd learn to win. That was not in the plan. The plan was survive. The plan changed." "I noticed." The old woman's eyes went past her granddaughter to the far wall, where a tall man in black stood not looking at either of them and seeing both. She held the look a moment longer than politeness required, then brought it back. "We'll talk about that one. Not tonight, but we'll talk." "There's nothing to talk about." "There's always something to talk about when a man stands that still," the grandmother said, and folded her hands back into her lap. Subject closed on her terms, the way she closed every subject. Across the floor, Loretta Vance had given up on dignity. She stood by the new sign at the mouth of the general ward with a tissue pressed under one eye and her reading glasses fogged where they hung on their chain. And when Jasmine finally rose and came toward her, Loretta held up a hand as if to say, "Give me a second, I am not finished," and then pulled her into an embrace anyway. "You changed the sign," Loretta said into her shoulder. "I changed the sign. You know what they used to call this ward." Loretta stepped back and wiped under both eyes now, methodical. A woman restoring a face she had spent 30 years keeping level. Overflow, that's what it said on the requisition forms. Overflow, like the people in it were water somebody spilled. It says something else now. I read it. Loretta's voice went thick, and she coughed it clear. I read it 4 times before the doors opened. Made a resident read it out loud to me so I'd believe the letters were staying put. The plaque by the door caught the light. Jasmine had chosen the words herself, and she had chosen them short, because she had spent 3 years watching long words on hospital walls mean nothing to the people who needed them. 2 lines, a name and a promise. She let Loretta read them a 5th time and said nothing, because some things a woman should be allowed to finish reading in her own time. "They're going to ask me," Loretta said at last, tucking the tissue up her sleeve, the way she'd tucked 100 things up that sleeve over 30 years. "The other nurses, the ones who were here when he ran this place, they're going to want to know how a night shift girl, doing doubles, ends up with her name on the deed. What are you going to tell them? The truth. That you took care of somebody nobody else would touch, and you didn't flinch, and it came back to you." Loretta's chin lifted. "That's not a lie. That's just not the whole shape of it. The whole shape of it stays with the people who were in the room. I know that. I've been keeping night shift secrets since before you were born, baby." She said it plainly, no drama in it, a woman stating her qualifications. "I signed my own name on a morphine log once for you, and didn't ask a single question, and I'd do it again, and I'll go to my rest, never having said one word about why." Jasmine looked at her, the woman who had covered her, who had told her about a floor that had no dust, who had risked a license on a signature and never once brought it up as a debt. She reached out and squeezed Loretta's hand, the one that had signed, and let the squeeze say what she was not going to embarrass either of them by saying aloud. "You're the head of nursing now," Jasmine said. "Officially, Monday, there's an office with your name being cut into the glass right now." Loretta's face did something complicated, and then gave up on managing itself entirely. Minjae found her by the tall windows 20 minutes later, when the crowd had thinned to the kind of guest who stays to be seen staying. He had a glass in his hand that he was not drinking from. The koi rode the edge of his collar the way it always did, showing and not showing. "The board chairman wants to speak to you," he said. "He wants to speak to you and use my face to do it." Yes, a pause that had weight in it. "You understand these men very quickly. I've watched men like him sign things over the top of my head for 3 years." She took the untouched glass out of his hand, set it on the sill, because a prop in a man's hand was a thing she had learned to remove. "He can make his appointment like everyone else. Tuesday, through the office. You have an office now. I have a whole building, She stopped. The word had come up from somewhere old and easy, and she pressed it back down where it belonged. "I have a whole building." He caught the stop. Of course he caught it. He caught everything. That was the thing about him that had frightened her at the start, and stopped frightening her somewhere around the third night. But he let it go, and the letting go was its own kind of gift, and neither of them named it. The chairman came anyway, because men like the chairman do not wait for Tuesday. He arrived with a woman on his arm whose jewelry was doing the talking, and a smile that had been fitted to his face by professionals. He took Jasmine's hand in both of his, the deed-signing hand, and shook it too long. "Dr. Brooks, what you've done here." He shook his head at the ceiling, as if the ceiling had done it. A renovation on this scale, and the third floor especially, a triumph, a triumph. We had heard the previous administration let that wing go to ruin. The previous administration knew exactly what was on that floor, Jasmine said. The professionally fitted smile held for one full second and then developed a hairline crack. "There was never any construction up there for 11 months, she went on, and she said it the way she said a patient's chart, flat, factual, no heat in it, because heat was what he was braced for, and she gave him none. No permits, no dust, no noise. You sat on this board while a floor of a hospital was rented out, and the rent was run through the foundation. You didn't ask what the tenant was paying for. That was the arrangement. Nobody asked. Dr. Brooks, I really don't. You don't have to." She released his hand. "The federal auditors have the foundation's books. You'll want your own lawyer, not the hospital's. The hospital's lawyer works for me now, and he has a very full calendar." The woman with the jewelry had gone still. The chairman opened his mouth and closed it, and made the small backward motion of a man who has just understood that the floor he is standing on belongs to the person he came to flatter. He murmured something about the hour. He left. He took the jewelry with him. Do-yoon was suddenly at Jasmine's shoulder, having crossed the atrium without appearing to move, the way he did. He watched the chairman's back retreat toward the coat check. "He'll call 3 people in the parking lot," Do-yoon said. "Let him. 2 of them won't answer." A thing that in another man might have been a smile, touched the corner of his mouth and left. "I already spoke with them this week." She looked at him. In the beginning, he had looked at her the way you look at a problem you have been ordered not to solve. Somewhere along the nights that had changed, and she had felt it change, the exact shift, the night in the dark hallway when he had come through the door with his phone light and revised every assumption he had walked in with. He met her eyes now the way you meet an equal, and he inclined his head a fraction, and it was the most respect she had ever seen him spend on anyone who was not the man he served. "He kept his word," Do-yoon said quietly. It took her a moment to understand he meant Min-jae, and another moment to understand it was not a small thing for Do-yoon to say. "The deed, the dialysis, all of it. He does not always keep his word to men. He kept it to you." He let a beat pass. "I have worked for him 11 years. I have never watched him hand a thing away and stand taller for it." "He didn't hand it away," Jasmine said. "I bought it." "With what?" "By being the only person in his life who didn't want it." Do-won considered that. Then he did the thing she had not seen him do, not once, in all the nights of guns on carpets and men on service stairs. He smiled, fully, briefly, and turned it off, and went to make sure the chairman got to his car without incident, because that too was his job, and a man like Do-yoon kept all of his jobs. The atrium emptied by degrees. Caterers folded white cloth off long tables. Somewhere a vacuum started and stopped, ashamed of itself. The grandmother had been taken upstairs to rest in a room that was hers now for as long as she wanted it, a room on the 2nd floor with a window facing east, because the old woman had said once, years ago, that she wanted to see a morning coming instead of a morning that had already arrived. Jasmine had remembered. Jasmine remembered everything about the woman who had raised her. That was the debt at the center of all of it, the debt no deed could close. And she had stopped trying to close it and started simply paying the interest, week by week, Thursday by Thursday. She walked the 3rd floor before she left. She wanted to see it empty once, before it filled with people who would never know what it had been. The doors had numbers now, real ones, brass, screwed into wood that had been sanded down and painted over so that the smell of leather and old money was gone, and the smell of a hospital, antiseptic and honest, had replaced it. Behind each door was a bed. Behind each door was a bed for someone who would arrive through the emergency entrance with no insurance and no advocate and no lawyer with a full calendar, and who would be put here, on the floor that had once hidden a wounded man from the law, and cared for as if they were worth caring for, because on paper, and in fact, they now were. She stopped at the third door on the left. It had no significance to anyone but her. She stood in front of it a while. The mahogany was gone. She had ordered it stripped out first, before the permits even cleared, and she had watched two men carry the panels down the service stairs, and she had felt nothing she could name, only the particular quiet of a thing being made right. The camera had come out of the wall the same day. She had asked to see it before it was destroyed, the small black square that had watched her kneel in another man's blood, and she had held it in her palm, and understood that it had been aimed to catch her death, and had caught her mercy instead, and then she had told them to break it, and they had. A footstep behind her. She knew the weight of it before she turned. "You shouldn't be on your feet this long," she said, without turning. "You keep telling me what I shouldn't do. Someone has to. You're famously bad at it." Min Jae came to stand beside her, in front of the door with no meaning to anyone but the two of them. He looked at the brass number. She watched him look at it. Whatever he was seeing, it was not the number. "I stood on the other side of this door," he said, "and I told a woman she had seen nothing. You had a gun under my jaw. I did. And I told you to sit down. You did." He was quiet. The scar under his shirt, healed now to a line, rode with his breathing. "Do you know what I thought, in that moment, before the fever took the room? You thought I was going to scream. I thought you were going to be the last thing I saw." He said it without weight, which was how she knew the weight was there. "And I was wrong about which door I had walked through. I thought it was the one that killed me. It was the one that didn't." She did not answer that right away. There were things a person let sit in the air because catching them too fast would crush them. She had learned that at bedsides, in the seconds after the worst news, when the kindest thing was silence held open like a door. "They're going to write about tonight," she said finally. "The reopening, the renovation, the mysterious benefactor. They'll get all of it wrong." "Yes. Good, let them." She turned from the door. "The only people who need the true story already have it, and none of us are going to tell it." He inclined his head, the smallest bow, a man agreeing to keep the one secret he had never once considered keeping, until she taught him there were things worth more than being feared. She walked the length of the floor to the elevator, and he walked with her, slower than he used to, because she had made him slower on purpose, because a man who lived 2 seconds ahead of his own body was a man who fell in the dark, and she had taught him to live inside it instead. The elevator came. She held the door with one hand. "Thursday," she said. "The dialysis. She's here now, 2nd floor, so it's downstairs, not across the city, not a phone call to a center that keeps moving her." Her voice did not shake, and she made sure of it. "Do you understand what that is? To take a woman who spent a year being moved from Thursday to Saturday, 3 times a month, by people who decided her life was an inconvenience, and to give her a Thursday that no one can move, ever." "I understand it now," he said. "I did not, before you. I want to be honest about that." The elevator waited. Down the hall, a nurse she had hired that week wheeled a supply cart into a numbered room, humming something under her breath, entirely unaware that any of this had ever been anything other than what it was tonight. "You knelt in front of a room full of people," Jasmine said. "You know what that costs a man like you. I know exactly what it costs. Then don't do it again. She stepped into the elevator. You paid it once. It's paid. I don't need the gesture repeated for the cameras that Do-yoon won't let take pictures anyway. Something moved across his face that on any other man she would have called being caught out. I didn't do it for the room, he said. I know. She let the door begin to close and stopped it with her hand one last time, because there was one thing left, and she was a woman who finished her charts. I know you didn't. That's why I let you up on 3 instead of leaving you down there. The doors closed on whatever his face did next. She was glad, a little, not to see it, because there were expenses even she did not need to collect in full. The lobby was dark when she reached it, the good dark of a building at rest, security lights low, the new plaque by the general ward catching a single beam and holding it. She stopped in the middle of the marble floor she now owned and stood there in the quiet, in the deep teal she still wore under the borrowed elegance of the evening, because she had refused to give up the scrubs even for one night, because the scrubs were the truth of her and the deed was only the receipt. She thought about a service stairwell at almost 3 in the morning. She thought about a badge that should have refused her and opened instead, held out like bait by a man in a gray suit who had wanted a body he could bury. She thought about how the whole architecture of the thing had been built to end with her dead on a floor that didn't exist, and how instead it ended with her holding the keys. She did not smile. She had never been a woman who smiled at the size of a thing. She turned off the last light herself, because it was hers to turn off, and walked out through doors that locked behind her, into a night that was, at last, only a night, 12 degrees, maybe colder. She had forgotten her coat again. This time it was because she owned the building she would come back to in the morning. She didn't feel the cold. The morning came the way the grandmother had asked for it to come, from the east, and it found the second-floor room before it found anything else in the building. Jasmine was already there. She had come back at 7, badge on the Italian coat, the same coat she had worn out into 12 degrees the night before, and would keep forgetting until the day she died. The grandmother was awake. She sat propped against 2 pillows, watching the light fill the window she had wanted her whole life, and she did not turn her head when the door opened. She knew the step. You slept here, the grandmother said in Korean. I slept in my building, Jasmine said. There's a difference. The old woman's mouth moved, not quite a smile. On the tray beside her, the dialysis schedule sat under a glass of water. Thursday circled. No red pen needed anymore, because no one was going to move it. The machine that would clean her blood lived 4 doors down now. It could not be rescheduled. It could not be pended. It belonged to the granddaughter who owned the wall it was bolted to. Aigu, the grandmother whispered, to the window, to the morning, the girl who counted pills. The old woman lifted a hand from the blanket. The skin of it was thin now, marked at the wrist where the machine took her twice a week, and she turned it palm up the way she used to when Jasmine was small and had scraped a knee and needed the hurt looked at. Sit, she said. 1 minute. The floor can wait 1 minute. Jasmine sat. She put her hand in the offered hand. Her grandmother had raised her on a cleaner's wage and a father's absence, had circled dialysis dates in red because red was the only pen in the drawer, had never once in 29 years asked the girl to be smaller so the world would be easier. That was the whole inheritance. It had turned out to be enough to build a hospital on. You look tired, the grandmother said. I own a building. It's a lot of light to leave on. Then hire someone to leave it on. The old woman's thumb moved once across the back of Jasmine's hand, a thing she had done at bedsides. Jasmine was too young to remember. You spent your whole life catching what fell. Now the net is yours. Let some of it hold itself. Jasmine set a cup of tea within reach and left before the water in it could cool, because the words had found a soft place, and she had a floor to run, and could not afford, this morning, to sit in a soft place too long. There was a whole floor waiting to be filled, and floors did not fill themselves. The third floor took its first patient at 9:40. He came up in a wheelchair pushed by an orderly who had worked in the overflow ward for 6 years and had never once been sent above the second landing. His name was on a brass number now, room 304, and he was a roofer who had fallen 2 stories onto a chain-link fence and had no insurance, and a wife who had already been told, at 3 other hospitals, what beds like this one cost. She followed the chair with her purse held against her chest like a shield. She kept waiting for someone to stop them. No one stopped them. Jasmine met them at the door. She had traded the gala dress for the deep teal scrubs weeks ago in her head, and now wore them by right, the gold thread of her name catching the wide window light. She checked the man's chart. She checked the wife's face, which was the harder read, and softer. "He stays until he's healed," Jasmine said. "Not until you can pay. There's no bill coming." The wife opened her mouth, closed it. She looked at the room, at the bed with the clean rails, at the window with no mahogany over it, and no camera in the wall, and something in her chest let go that had been held for 3 hospitals and a long drive. "Why?" she managed. Jasmine did not give her a speech. She had learned, on a floor that used to lie about renovation, that the people who most needed the answer were the ones least able to sit through it. "Because the room was empty," she said, "and you weren't." She wrote the roofer up for imaging, put him under the care of a resident she trusted, and walked out before gratitude could turn into something the woman would feel she had to repay. Debt was the currency of the old 3rd floor. She was not going to reopen the account under a new name. In the corridor, the roofer's wife caught up with her anyway. She had the purse still clutched, and she pulled from it a folded square of paper, soft at the creases from being opened and closed too many times. "They gave me this," she said. "At the last place, before they moved him." Jasmine took it, an estimate, a number with too many digits, and under it a line for a deposit, and under that a signature block waiting for a name the family did not have the money to make good. She had seen 100 of these. She had almost signed things like them herself, for a grandmother, on nights when the convenio said pending and meant no. She folded it back along its worn creases and handed it to the woman. "Keep it," Jasmine said. "Not to pay. To remember what a building looks like when it decides you're a number instead of a person." She nodded toward room 304, toward the clean rails and the east had not reached yet. "Then look at this one, and know the difference is a choice somebody makes. Every time." The wife pressed the paper back into her purse, like something she would need as evidence someday, and went in to sit with her husband. Jasmine went to find the resident and make sure the imaging was ordered stat, because principles were fine, but a roofer with a fractured pelvis needed a scan, not a philosophy. Loretta arrived at 10 with a box. She had not been due until Monday. She came anyway, because the woman had spent 30 years being told where to stand, and could not quite believe there was now a door with her name going onto the glass. The box held 11 years of things she had kept in a locker built for 6 months of things. A photograph of a shift that no longer existed, a mug, a pin from a service award the hospital had stopped giving out when it stopped being able to launder the money that paid for the ceremony. "You didn't have to come in," Jasmine said. "I had to see it before somebody took it back." Loretta set the box on the desk of an office that was hers now, sat in the chair, and put both hands flat on the wood the way a person touches a thing to make sure it's real. Then her face folded, briefly, and unfolded. She had signed her own name to a vial of morphine at 5:52 in the morning, weeks ago, and asked no questions. And she had spent every day since waiting for that signature to become a rope. It never had. It had become a wall that other people broke themselves against instead. "Chief of Nursing," Loretta said, testing the shape of it. "Monday," Jasmine said. "The glass is already ordered." "And you?" The older woman looked up. What do they call you now? Jasmine considered it. The deed had a legal word on it, owner, and the board had a word they used in the meetings they no longer controlled, proprietor, and the federal agents combing the foundation's books had a word too, complainant. None of them fit the thing she actually did all day. They can call me Dr. Brooks, she said, same as always. The board did not survive the week. It was not a firing, nothing so clean. It was a slow understanding, moving desk to desk like weather, that the chairman was no longer taking calls, and the vice chair had retained private counsel, and the treasurer had flown to a country with no extradition and a nice climate. The foundation that had paid for 11 months of renovation without a permit, without dust, without a single hammer, was now a set of ledgers in a federal building downtown, and every man whose signature appeared in those ledgers had discovered on the same Tuesday that the hospital's own attorney would no longer answer his email. The attorney worked for the woman on the 3rd floor now. She had told the chairman as much, at the reopening, in front of the elite, and he had gone out to the parking lot to make 3 phone calls, and 2 of them had gone unanswered, because Do-yoon had reached those men first. Jasmine did not attend the unraveling. She had a floor to run. Do-yoon came by once during that week, not for her, ostensibly, but with an envelope that had to be handed over by someone who could be trusted not to open it. He found her at the 3rd floor nursing station updating a chart by hand because the electronic system was still being purged of 11 months of false renovation entries. He wanted you to have the keys to the mechanical rooms, Do-yoon said, setting the envelope down. The real ones. The floor plans of this building are yours. Every panel, every box, every stair. He paused. He had cut 2 men on an East Service stair in the dark once because they had those same plans, and he did not have to say why he was handing hers over now. No one holds a plan of your building but you. That's how he wants it. Jasmine took the envelope. She thought about a power box cut from outside a wall, about how a house full of soldiers had gone dark because a handful of trusted people held the map. She understood the gift for exactly what it was. Tell him I said thank you, she said. Then, because Do-hyun had carried a bloody scrub of information for 2 days once and never spent it cheaply, she added, and you did good work. All of it. The line came back to him, the way things do when they circle. He had said it to her, once, on the floor of a hidden suite while his boss bled. He inclined his head a fraction, the closest he came to being caught, and left her the plans and the quiet. Min-jae came on the 4th day, in the evening, when the building had gone quiet. He came the way he came now, on his own feet, the scar on his left flank a closed line under a black shirt, the koi still riding the side of his neck and vanishing under his collar the way it always had. He did not bring men. Do-yoon waited in the car in the lot, watching the entrances out of a habit that would outlive the reason for it, and Min-jae walked into the atrium of the building he had bought and handed to her, and stood at the bottom of the stairs like a man who had learned the exact distance to keep. "You're here late," he said. "I own the lights." She came down 2 steps and stopped. "I can leave them on as long as I want." Something moved at the corner of his mouth. He had knelt in this room, once, in front of everyone, and taken her hand and kissed it, and she had let him rise on a count of 3. They had agreed it would not happen again. He had not argued. He was, she had learned, a man who understood the value of a thing done once. "The roofer in 304, he said. His imaging came back clean. No surgery. She looked at him. "You read my patient charts." "I read who my money is taking care of." He said it without weight, the way he said most true things, and let it sit. "It's a good use, better than the last one." "It's the only use," she said. That was the deal. It was. He looked up the stairs, past her, to the mezzanine and the corridor beyond it, where a 2nd-floor window faced east, and an old woman slept. "How is she?" She watched the morning come in, twice now. Jasmine let the tea-colored quiet hold a beat. She says we're going to talk about you, some other time, on her terms. And what will you tell her? Jasmine came down the last 2 steps. Standing on the floor of the atrium, she was level with the middle of his chest, the place she had once pressed a stethoscope to, and heard a heart run for reasons that had nothing to do with fever, and she did not press anything now. She did not need to. She had heard it. Some things, once heard, stay heard. I'll tell her the truth, she said, that a man who owned everything gave me the one thing he could have kept, and asked for nothing back, and that's the only reason I let him near my grandmother's window. Min-jae was silent. Outside, a car door opened and did not close, Do-yoon shifting his weight, watching the street. That's not nothing, he said finally. No, Jasmine agreed. It's not nothing. It's just not owed. Baek Sang-hoon, somewhere across the city, was signing a document he did not understand, in a language of finance he had never bothered to learn, in an office emptied of the men who used to fill it. Jasmine would never see him. She had never seen him. He had cut the power to a house one night, believing he was cutting a life, and the life had learned to breathe on account of 4 in the dark. And now the man who had held the knife was a signature, losing its value in a room she would never enter. That was the shape of the ending she had chosen. Not a body, a subtraction. Walter Prescott was gone in the way that leaves the most silence. Not dead, ruined. The renovation that never happened had become the first thing the agents understood, and the account with the ambush on it had his name where a hidden partner's name is never supposed to appear, and the badge that had opened a door for her because someone wanted a body found beside a dying man had been traced back to the clearance he himself had set. He had chosen her, once, in a corridor at 3 in the morning, because he looked at a black nurse who needed money and saw someone easy to bury. Jasmine had told him, at the mansion, in the last room he would ever confront her in, that he should have chosen someone who couldn't sew. She had meant it as a fact. He had heard it as a sentence. He was right to. She thought of none of them for very long. That was the luxury the deed had bought her, more than the building, more than the Thursday machine, the right to stop thinking about the people who had needed her to be smaller. Go home, she told Min-jae. You have a scar to keep from tearing. I know the man who stitched it. He's very strict. He is. Min-jae let the almost smile finish this time, which was rare enough that she marked it. He turned to go. At the door he stopped, one hand on the frame, and looked back at her standing alone in the atrium of a building that had tried to end her and had made her its owner instead. The floor, he said. The third one. What did you do with the door? She knew which door. There was only one that meant anything, and it meant nothing to anyone alive but the 2 of them. Third on the left, the one that had not killed her. I left it, she said, numbered it, 303, put a bed behind it. She held his eyes. Somebody's going to sleep there tonight who couldn't have afforded the hallway a month ago, and they'll never know what it used to be. That's the point. Min-jae took that the way he took the imaging results, without ceremony, storing it somewhere it would stay. Jinja, he said, quiet, the word she had put against his chin the first night to buy herself the surprise on his face. He gave it back to her now, like a coin returned. Then he was gone, and the car door finally closed, and the lot went dark except for the lights she owned and left on because she could. Loretta found her still there an hour later, doing the thing chiefs of nursing are supposed to do the person above them out of but never can, walking the floors one more time. You're going to sleep in this place, Loretta said. I slept here last night. You slept in your car in the lot, Do-hoon told me. Loretta had learned the man's name and made him carry her box up 2 flights, which was, Jasmine suspected, the closest thing to trust either of them would ever say out loud. Go home, baby. The overflow ward isn't the overflow ward anymore. It has your name on the requisitions and a chief with a door. It'll keep. Jasmine looked down the corridor of the general ward, where the plaque with 2 lines had gone up, a name and a promise, where the word overflow had been scraped off a system that used to file human beings under surplus. She thought about the counts she used to make at 3 in the morning, ampoules that came up short because a director was renting the floor beneath her to a cartel, a grandmother's dialysis pushed to Saturday for the 3rd time in a month, while a man in a charcoal suit decided she was the easiest thing in the building to sacrifice. None of that was on the requisitions now. What was on the requisitions was a roofer, and a bed behind door 303, and a machine bolted to a 2nd-floor wall that ran every Thursday and could not be moved. "I'll go," Jasmine said. "In a minute." She walked to the end of the general ward, past the new plaque, to the window there. Below, the city held its cold the way cities do, indifferent, enormous, full of people counting things they were short of at 3 in the morning. She had been one of them a month ago. She had gone down a service stair with her badge in her pocket and opened the wrong door and found a dying man on the floor, and every single thing that had tried to kill her since had, one by one, become a thing she owned. She thought about the grandmother's window, facing east, waiting for a morning that would arrive whether anyone deserved it or not. Then she turned off the last light on the floor herself, because that was hers to do now, and went down to the lobby where the doors would lock behind her, and she would step out into 12 degrees again, and forget her coat again, not because she had nothing, but because she had a building to come back to in the morning. The doors locked. The cold met her. She walked into it without slowing. She still didn't feel it. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever healed someone the world taught you to fear, my loves? Have you ever walked into a room where no one respected you and left it holding the power? Mark my words, dignity is not given at a door. It is taken, one steady hand at a time. Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about dignity, courage, and justice, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.